Welcome to Shaping E-commerce with IronPlane. This is where we talk about e-commerce development, solutions, digital marketing, and all things e-commerce. Be sure to check out the description below each video to find additional resource links and show notes. We upload new videos each day. Please like and subscribe to our channel.
Welcome back to another episode of Shaping E-commerce. I'm Tim Bucciarelli, Director of Engagement with IronPlane. And today I'm joined by Jared Shields, and we're talking today about how to get the most out of your e-commerce agency. So before we get into it, Jared, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of my sense of kind of why this conversation matters to merchants and agencies, and what we hope to achieve by sharing our point of view on this. So generally, when we're talking about e-commerce projects, they tend to be business critical. So we're talking about businesses who have invested in their digital commerce environment. So technology, staff, customer support, client engagement, these are all critical components of business success. And investing in that in your e-commerce platform and your e-commerce partner is really business critical. So the other reasons are really relationships matter. As a business, you can think of everything as transactional, but in reality, especially when you're dealing with longer term projects like e-commerce projects tend to be, you could be in this relationship for 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 5-6 years if you have a long support contract. And the relationships that you develop and the value that you place on those relationships really makes a difference in how you're able to work with your agency and get the best out of them. The other is reputation. Every business in an industry knows other people in that same industry. And as you work through your projects with your teams, people tend to develop opinions of how you operate. That is often referred to as karma. So I think it's important to recognize that in these relationships, in these projects, it's really relevant to be aware that it's not just a one and done project, that how you behave, how you interact really does have repercussions on your own reputation. And of course, at the end of the day, it's about the business results. And I think all of those things that I said previously really impact the quality of the results that you're going to be getting out of your e-commerce agency and your e-commerce project. So that is just the framing of why we feel like it's so important to consider how to work with your e-commerce agency to get the most out of that relationship. So with that, Jared, that's why it matters. And hopefully we can shed some light on how people can have effective relationships with their e-commerce agency. So thanks for joining me today. And let's start off maybe just with a quick note about your background for those who haven't met you previously. And then we'll dive into kind of the typical players in this relationship that we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. So I am head of projects at IronPlane, and that means that I currently oversee the entire PM team, but I'm also involved with the development team on the process side, and a little bit involved on the sales side and architecture sides for new sites or complex integrations. So I have touch points at kind of various levels of the organization. But before this, I was a project manager for about 8 years. So a lot of direct work with many clients, many developers. And I've built up a lot of insight about this topic, which I think is not often talked about or covered, just in terms of how to get more out of your relationship based on the people involved. I think a lot of people end up thinking that we're a service where you just, input some simple information and then we can run with it and go from there. But it's a more involved relationship than just copy pasting things back and forth.
And that's especially true, just to kind of put things in a little bit more context. Our world of e-commerce development is a little bit different than like Wix or Shopify even. We build and maintain Magento open source and Adobe Commerce Cloud websites. So in the world of e-commerce platforms, those are some of the most robust and integratable, customizable, and complex implementations that you can have. So it's not a very simple project that we're involved in, and that makes this conversation all the more relevant, I think.
Yeah.
So a good place to start, just kind of if you can share, like, from the point of view of the client organization, who are the stakeholders that should be kind of considered in this relationship framework that we're talking about?
Yeah. So in most organizations, there are two stakeholders, two people responsible for this relationship, really, with the web developer. There's always typically one main point of contact. Often this ends up being a marketing person or a design person or somebody who's in some way related to your site's content. We'll talk about that more in a second. The other main stakeholder that's always present is the decision maker. So sometimes some organizations that's the CTO, sometimes it's the CFO, sometimes it's the CEO. It could be a director of operations, it could be various positions, but there's typically one person who does the sign off for, it might be approving a large project, it might be approving business logic. It's the person who's ultimately going to see the results and make a judgment on those. So sometimes there's a third stakeholder in the CFO or whoever's managing billing on the client's organization side. They might not be a decision maker, but if they're the ones paying the invoices, it's important that they're in the loop, especially in times when we're working on a bigger project and the bill is going to be higher, for example. So those are the kind of the key members involved. And we see it in all different forms. Sometimes we'll work with organizations who have, their main point of contact knows their site in and out. They know who to go to in their organization if they don't know the answer, who to pull into calls. They're keeping their own stakeholders up to date with everything that's moving on the site. I would say that's a more rare case, though, when we have that one person who's connected properly everywhere they need to be. Usually what we get is, somebody works on marketing and that's their main job. And the business says, oh, can you run the website too? And so, usually they dive in, but they're not e-commerce experts. They're more focused on marketing. So, most agencies, IronPlane obviously included, will work with, any organization regardless of your main contact setup. But that primary point of contact is probably the most pivotal in terms of the relationship, in the sense that this person needs to have some familiarity with your site and needs to understand not development, but the business logic that the organization is trying to accomplish. And they need to understand, once something is built, how to then use it in their system. So, agencies will develop new features, will build documentation for you. And as crazy as it sounds, there are some people who struggle with documentation, functional documentation. People's brains built for different things. And unfortunately, it's something that we've seen. And so in cases where our main point of contact is maybe not fully invested in the development side of things, and is just has too much marketing work to focus on. Over time, that causes a strain on the overall relationship for a variety of reasons. That person, if they're not understanding the business logic, how to test a certain feature, and just how to operate their site at a basic level, you know, if the agency doesn't have contact with all of the stakeholders and it's just this main point of contact, we've seen plenty of issues come up where the development process goes fine, but the comprehension is too low on this main point of contact side, but they're going to communicate to their stakeholders that it's an issue with the agency.
So it's clear in what you're saying that this primary point of contact for the agency carries a lot of the burden of either knowing enough about the technical, operational, business aspects of their own business to be able to provide accurate and clear direction to the agency, or they may not know all of those things, but they have the wherewithal to go out and communicate effectively internally so that they can efficiently, and by efficiently I mean quickly, get the answers to questions that the agency might have about how to proceed and give the result that is going to be valued across the entire internal team for the client. And from the client's perspective, I think so. We talk about the stakeholders within the organization of the business getting the site built. Let's talk also briefly about, from their perspective, looking at the agency. What do they see as the people that they interact with at the agency as well? And IronPlane, we can speak directly about our own setup and recognize that other agencies might have slightly different setups. So, like, in my opinion, the most typical setup is it starts out with a salesperson. The salesperson promises them the world. I mean, yeah, I'm being facetious, but they sign the deal, and that salesperson sometimes becomes the account manager. Other times, they hand it off to an account manager within the agency. And then you'll have the PM and the developers who, the PM is usually front and center with the client. The account manager jumps in when there's a relationship or contract issue. And then developers are kind of never really heard from and kind of are always in the background. That to me is always like a classic agency, e-commerce agency kind of makeup from a merchant or client perspective. Talk a little bit about how IronPlane fits into that or doesn't.
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, the flow that you outlined, for IronPlane is pretty typical across, agencies that I've worked at, and I think agencies in general. I think that sometimes, clients will want to speak to developers directly. We can pull them in certain occasions, but it does end up being this a sort of a few siloed lines of communication, because like you said, it's usually the PM interacting directly with the main point of contact, and then the salesperson or client success person interacting with a higher up stakeholder. In every agency as well, there's also that final level of occasionally the CEO will have to be pulled in to talk to the other CEO because they like to talk to each other. And, that's when the relationship is either at a really bad point or a really good point, when those CEO conversations need to happen. Either you're talking about some big new thing that you can do, or you're talking about some big issue. And so those siloed lines of communication can be great in some circumstances. If you have a large roadmap, your production team, your main point of contact, and your PM might need to stay focused on that current roadmap while your account manager or client success person is working with higher ups to build the roadmap beyond your current backlog. I think that what happens in most projects is that those siloed lines of communication never end up overlapping. And I think that's part of this conversation is those lines do need to overlap at least sometimes to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Because it's when those don't overlap at all that we see issues long term. Um,
Give me an example of how IronPlane kind of tries to get them to overlap.
so basically, all of our PMs communicate to our main point of contact. Anytime there's some mm, bigger feature we're working on that might require more hours or a bigger business decision, we always encourage our main point of contact to talk to their stakeholders and make sure they have buy-in before we proceed on something. So in that case, the agency's not necessarily talking to the stakeholders. We always try to if we can. Ideally, you schedule a planning meeting and you get everybody who's going to weigh in on that feature, whatever it is, in one place. Typically, it's just hard to coordinate that. So beyond these kind of one-off instances where we're working on something bigger, we also try to just check in with the stakeholder at least once a quarter, just to make sure the relationship as a whole is going well, get a sentiment for the stakeholders' impression of how development is going, because that'll highlight for us as an agency very quickly. If we hear feedback like, "Oh, we've been super unhappy," and that's completely contrasting our internal view on the development side, which might say, "Oh, things are going great." That helps us identify, okay, there's some communication issue that we need to work on. There's some understanding that needs to be raised.
And in terms of our own internal silos, it seems like one of the things that helps us effectively there is our systems and how open we make those systems to our clients. So we've got the silos of like kind of the account management, what we call the engagement team, and then we've got the project management, and then we've got the developer, front end developer, back end developer, UX, DevOps, and we've got the executive team. And one of the things that I like about how we operate is that everyone is using the same systems. Everyone has access to the same systems, with varying degrees of authority within those systems. But it's that centralized, systematic communication that allows everyone to be on the same page more or less consistently. So that includes, our ticketing system, our asynchronous communication tools like Slack. So I feel like those allow for all of the stakeholders to participate. And that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed, like the most successful relationships between agency and client are those where really the stakeholders are all using those same systems. The more people that are communicating in those systems, the more people are aware of what's going on, the more people feel a part of the team, more people feel like they can get their questions answered and that things are moving in the right direction. So I kind of feel like that has a positive impact on the overall project success.
It definitely does, and I think the ticket setup in particular is super relevant to this conversation because some agencies will have a ticket system, but they will somewhat mask what developers approach or developer comments as they're working on a feature, and then just update the client once it's ready to test or once something needs to be discussed. Versus in our system, you see every single ticket comment and you see updates from developers, you see questions from developers, you'll get to see a bit into how we go about it. And it's an important thing for the main point of contact in particular. I mean, like you said, it's important for everybody to have access to be able to work within the ticket system, but it's especially important for the main point of contact to understand the ticket system and to be monitoring which seems simple, but at IronPlane, at other agencies, I've seen plenty of clients who are not at all willing to work within a ticket system, and they just want to tell you their requirements over a call, email, chat, and have you do it. And any agency will work with you. Yeah, we'll try and serve you however we can. But if your main point of contact is reading through those tickets, seeing developer questions, seeing how we think, it helps that main point of contact frame future requests. It helps them think through these questions beforehand. It's a really healthy system, but again, one of those things where, as an organization, it's important for all stakeholders to know that their main point of contact is as in tune with the development as they can be.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to my mind is like the phrase, do you really want to see how the sausage is made? And so I guess there's some benefit. Some people on your team should be right in there and being totally involved and see how the sausage is being made. Other folks, the executive team, maybe they just want to see the end result and the beautiful product that comes out. But for us, it's essential that at least, the day-to-day operations are very involved in that. And one of the things that we often are doing with our clients is we're going through the process of identifying new functionality or adjustments. And can you talk a little bit about how a client and an agency can make that process efficient and effective of identifying the challenges or the projects, going through whatever process of requirements gathering, and what's the typical flow for us on that?
So the typical flow, the most important thing, again, from the organization side, the client organization side, is having all of the knowledge that we will need, that the agency will need, about your site and about your business. Agencies know all of the questions to ask. Once you bring up a feature, like say you bring up a CRM, for example, I want a CRM. We have experience with CRMs. We know the questions to ask. You just need, as an organization, to make sure that you have the people at that meeting, on that email chain, whatever it might be, who can answer the questions. So, for a CRM, we might ask, what are your main goals? Start there, and then start refining it. Do you need specifically a ticket system? Do you need different departments within that? Do you need automation roles within that? And we'll help explain to you, what all of those things mean. All you need to do is just say, we need it to do this.
And you'll probably need to bring in your sales team, your marketing team, your tech team, your customer support team. Like, these are just a few of the potential stakeholders just in that example of the CRM, where if you're not getting all that information when you're doing the initial gathering of requirements, it's going to be way less efficient, 3 months down the road when the integration is done and your CSRs are like, but I don't have the data elements that I need to be able to support our customers. So like getting all the stakeholders up early on in the discovery, I think is so essential. Makes a world of difference.
And just to jump off of the CSR point, yeah, it is critical that for most sites, that the CSRs are in close contact with the main point of contact who's working with the agency. Just because the CSRs are seeing the problems in real time that customers are having. And, they can separate, in theory, what's a problem with the website and what's not. If it's just somebody's gotten, wants to return something and doesn't understand the process, that's not necessarily website. If somebody says, I can't add this product to the cart, that's a website issue. And that CSR needs to talk to the main point of contact, let the agency know. That's where some of the most valuable UX improvements and bug fixes really come from. Those edge case bug issues.
So I can imagine, a CSR identifies a problem. Let's say it's a bug, or it's just an issue rather. Like, and we don't know whether it's a bug, configuration, code, whatever, user error, who knows. But it is an issue that they've identified. Talk me through an effective way for the client to communicate that. It's like something that feels urgent to them. For example, um, several products that they just launched on their website are not appearing as they should. Let's just use that as an example. And the product manager gets upset, goes to the client lead that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. What's the most effective way to kind of approach that from the client side, talking to the agency?
So from the client side, in a case like that, bugs in particular, issues in particular, steps to reproduce are the number one most important thing. So in your example, some recently published products are not showing as they should be. So as the main point of contact, when you're talking to that product manager, you should ask, what are the specific products or what are some example SKUs? You should ask, what do you mean that they're not appearing as they should? Does that mean they're not showing up at all? Does that mean that they're showing up, but some data is incorrect or some display is incorrect? Gather the information on the client side so that you understand it and can reproduce it consistently. Then take that information to the agency because that's what they're going to need. That's what we need to investigate something efficiently. Let me put it that way. We can investigate, hey, some of our newest products aren't showing up properly, but it's going to take more time. We're going to go filter by latest products, find them on the front end. And so, but often we do get the requests from clients saying, hey, this thing isn't working. And they aren't sure of the details, just somebody mentioned to them in their organization it's not working. That's a very, very common misuse of time in the sense that agencies, we're here to help you. If you can't gather more details, we'll do what we can, but that can often lead to time that doesn't go anywhere if we don't know what specifically to fix. So details, screenshots are big, video recordings, things like that.
Yeah, I mean I remember when I was managing the e-commerce operations and a customer would call and say I can't do this, that, or the other thing. We would ask them just a few very basic questions like, okay, what what type of hardware are you on? Your phone? Are you on a tablet? Are you on your computer? And then what's your operating system? Just like the most basic questions, can you do it in an incognito window? Like we knew enough to ask some of the most basic customer support questions for problems on an e-commerce website. And I will say maybe 50% of the time we could resolve them right then and there. But the other 50%, we would have to hand it off. But in handing it off, we already had some of that critical information that could help inform other people who would test it and see if they could reproduce it. And so that's an area that I think is really important. If you do have that team of customer support folks who interact with your customers, gathering that type of data can really help a lot.
It can help a lot. And just a couple more things on that note. I mean, I often think about the concept of Occam's razor, which the simplest solution is often the right one. That applies very, very often in e-commerce where, yeah, you gather those simple details and often you can fix it right then and there. And it's important, again, to just gather those details, send them on, just so that the agency doesn't start working on it assuming it's a development issue. That can lead to a lot more time, especially if some big feature was just deployed, your mind might jump to, oh, it's a development issue, when in reality, we've seen cases where it wasn't. It was configuration that was fixed in 5 minutes if we had more details. So that's one part. The other part is over time, it's important that this main point of contact picks up on these details that need to be gathered. So The first time they come to an agency with an issue, they might not have all those details, and that's fine. Agency will help them get the details. But over time, it's important that the agency isn't asking for those details every single time. Your main point of contact needs the comprehension to know what to ask and how to understand things. We see too many cases where requirements are just not understood on the organization side, not communicated properly, and time ends up being wasted or fixing a different issue.
Yeah. It's help us help you. So we need a kind of standard of support in order for us to do our job efficiently. That's what it feels like. So I know from my own experience, when you do as a client kind of come across issues, you can kind of have a knee-jerk reaction. And that knee-jerk reaction can sometimes be pretty assertive, aggressive, sometimes even unprofessional in some cases. I mean, this is a tough one. I guess this is more kind of back to who you are as an agency, how you behave professionally, and similarly how your client behaves professionally. But any kind of good suggestions for either avoiding that type of reaction, knee-jerk reaction, and or how to diffuse that type of issue? Because this can be a pretty emotional topic sometimes if things aren't going well on a website.
Absolutely, yeah. And those, emotionally charged reactions often come from two places: either, a bug on the site that's causing some, in their minds, very big issue, or something wasn't estimated, it wasn't considered in estimates, or something unexpected came up, and so a significant chunk more time is being asked for approval. So, it's in some cases it's understandable when we get a knee jerk reaction. If we deployed something and then it broke something else, it's understandable to get a knee jerk reaction. But at this point, it comes down to pretty basic human behavior, right? Like, we're here to help you, regardless of your tone. If you come and you have that knee jerk reaction, first thing we're going to do is try and fix your problem. But you have to understand too that tone, it doesn't end in that moment, right? Like, that tone has repercussions throughout the relationship, throughout the project.
If someone's coming at you like full on aggressive and threatening, not threatening, but being blaming, I guess.
Yeah. If we get all caps messages that this needs fixed ASAP, it's like, of course, we're gonna try and fix it ASAP. If we see something's broken, we're here for your best interests.
Yeah.
That said, the way you go about presenting that matters. If you're making assumptions that, your agency did something wrong and you're screaming at them, that has an impact. It's possible we did do something wrong. Development is not a perfect science. There's no agency out there that's not making mistakes. We'll make mistakes, but we'll tell you about them beforehand, and we'll own them, and we'll work with you to figure out a solution that's going to keep that relationship happy. If the tone is constantly screaming and aggressive and you need to fix this, over time, as an agency, that becomes less valuable to us. It's we're here to serve you, but we're also here to serve us. And over the long time, those extremely aggressive situations, sometimes they'll lead to a credit, where we say, okay, a mistake was made, we'll give you some hours. Over time, some clients will abuse that. Some individuals will abuse that and try and get credit after credit. Over time, that stresses the relationship. And a lot of people forget that it's a two-way street. And I don't say that as a threat. I say that as, from a business side, you need to consider this, because if you're responsible for ending your own relationship with your agency, they're going to help you. They're going to give you access to all your site's code. But then you have to take that to a new agency that's going to charge you for reviewing that code. They're going to say, we have to fix all these things that the previous agency didn't do right. and it's going to cost you a lot more money to end up in the exact same situation. So frustration is always understandable. Bring those to a relationship call instead when you're talking, higher level about what needs to change. In the moment, focus on getting your site fixed or focus on getting the resolution you need. It doesn't have to be fluffy and peaceful, it can be, hey, just say, hey, this is the problem, need it fixed ASAP. And then I need to understand why it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's escalation for a reason, right? I mean, because the people with the feet on the ground getting the stuff done don't need to be bothered about people, negative temperament. Like, let's focus on solving the problem. And one of the things that I really like about the approach of most excellent agencies, and IronPlane included, is that we approach our prospects the same as we approach our clients, the same as we approach our clients who are ending the service with us. And it's really important because, like you said, clients come and go, and they have different reasons why they would want to change agencies. And as long as the relationship is strong, we are there for them during that transition and helping them, supporting them transition, whether they're going to a new e-commerce platform or they've been bought out by a different company and they're going with that other company's agency. It doesn't really matter to us. We don't take it personally. We want to support that client as they move through their entire experience with their e-commerce platform. We would love it if they would stay, but just like that consistency of temperament and approach of supporting prospects, clients, and clients who are leaving, I think that to me is a sign of a good agency.
It is, and I'd like to call out what you said earlier. In our onboarding, in our sales process, we do look for for why they're leaving, and if they're leaving because the agency never did anything right, and we need things ASAP, and we see these red flags, and it matters. We will disqualify a client if we are not going to be able to establish a successful relationship. And as an organization that's looking for a new agency, that's a very healthy sign. If that agency is asking you about temperament or is asking you about how you react in certain situations, because the agencies, and I've worked for a couple, that will take on any client, regardless of the site, regardless of temperament, regardless of the situation. It's not a matter of, I know that they have some rough clients, that doesn't affect me. It affects you. It can affect you. Those ASAP clients, those always immediate aggressive clients will sometimes get prioritized because it will seem to an agency, there's a huge issue. We got to jump on
wheel.
this. What's that?
The squeaky wheel.
Yeah, exactly. And so that pulls resources, development, project management resources away from other projects. So if you're hearing an agency asking and holding you accountable, that's a good sign, because it means that probably their other clients are the same way. And it just leads to more predictability, more from a timeline perspective, not necessarily you're not getting billed more if the agency has temperamental clients, but timeline can definitely be affected.
Yeah, and let's talk billing for a second and kind of expectations. That's a notoriously challenging topic sometimes, especially if the expectations are not set up front, and especially if within the client company there are different perspectives on what's billable, what's not billable, what should be billable, what should not be billable. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the agency perspective and kind of any advice in that challenging situation?
Yeah. I agree. That is, billing is definitely one of the areas that leads to the most relationship issues. I think typically we see it in a couple different ways. From the agency side, the production team is always billable. If you are interacting with the production team, you are being billed for that time.
And production team includes who?
Includes the project manager and the developers and DevOps. You rarely see DevOps, but basically, if work is being done on your site, you are being billed for it. Non-production team includes people like, account managers, salespeople, CEO, things like that. So a lot of the questions we get about what is billable or why is something going to take so long come from just misunderstandings in the industry. So a lot of people think, okay, well, I'm working with an agency that has a lot of experience with ERPs. So if I say, hey, we work with this ERP, they should be able to give me an estimate right away. They should know that top of head. And I shouldn't be billed for it since it's already in their heads. That's not the case. Every site is different. You could be asking for a very, very common feature like abandoned cart emails, and it might behave perfectly on 99 sites, but on your site, it behaves differently because you have different code, right? So just because we're the experts doesn't mean that we have estimates for everything top of head. And it doesn't mean that every feature that we implement on every site is going to take the same amount of time.
So there's a required discovery process where we can accurately estimate, unless a client comes to us and says, here's a blank check, whatever it takes to get this done, you don't need to estimate it for me, just get it done. But how often does that happen?
It happens, but it's rare. Yeah. It happens when there's trust in the relationship and they know that we're going to take care of them. But the issues come with expecting that we'll have these answers or that, when we give an estimate that it's perfectly accurate and that we're not going to bill for the additional time, which is almost never the case. There are some cases where sure. But in most cases, estimates, and we communicate this with our clients up front, estimates are not expected to be perfect. They're not expected to be accurate 90% of the time. We try and make them as accurate as possible. But again, every site is different. And at the end of the day, it's still people working on these estimates. People aren't perfect. So, from the billing side, I think from the organization side, it's important that the main point of contact very early on with a new agency works with the project manager to understand exactly what am I going to be billed for and what things are not billable. Because some agencies have setups like ours where you can talk to an account manager and not be billed for it and do some planning for the future. That account manager doesn't have all the site specific information. That's why you're getting billed by the project manager who does. So a lot of agencies do have an option, but if you're planning with your production team, your project manager, even that planning is billable. And it has to be billable because we need to know your specific requirements. If you only know part of your requirements, we'll estimate based on that. And then if a new requirement comes up, that changes the estimate and you're still getting billed for those things.
Yeah, I mean, this is a service industry after all. You can equate it similarly to lawyers, mechanics, or plumbers. They charge you for their time, and maybe they'll charge you for just showing up. And they'll charge you for the equipment that they have to get. But at the end of the day, the work they do needs to be paid for because that's how they make a living. And that's the same thing with agencies. And one thing I wanted to mention also is that, there's a little bit of a trade-off in the kind of old world of high-tech business, where it used to be this waterfall approach where you've got reams of paper documenting the specifications for something that's going to be built. And those specifications become part of a contract. And that contract becomes fixed price because those specifications are so detailed. and you've got your test cases, and you've got your QA, and you've got the what happens if this and then that. That's all the waterfall approach. Then you just start to build, and you build, 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 build. And at the bottom of the waterfall, you're done. Here you go. Here's the ream of paper. Here are all the test cases. We achieved the goal. Thank you. We'll take the money. See you later. Today, it's totally different. It's all agile. And unless a company is able to step in and say, okay, here is a ream of paper describing exactly what I need you to build, like nobody's going to want to do a fixed price. So it's agile. You come to us with ideas. You come to us with some rough requirements or reasonably detailed requirements even, but it's never going to be exactly right. There are always going to be areas where you need to adjust as you go. And that's the beauty of Agile, so that you can adjust as you go, make it better over time. But it is different because as you go through that Agile development process, it is billable every, cycle that you go through. So there is still value in working hard up front to get the discovery and the requirements documented well, but it's never going to be that waterfall approach of years past.
No, and from a recent example, I spent about 300 hours working very closely with an organization to map out a new site build. We got over 400 tickets created, very clear requirements, and it has followed those requirements almost exactly as outlined. But a few new requirements come up from the organization side. And beyond that, as we're working through that previously very, clearly outlined requirements, new business flows come up or new edge cases come up that need to be discussed. And so in that fixed waterfall approach, there's no room for that. And suddenly the agency's losing value. They'll still help you. In this case, we will always map it out as best we can. But as you said, things will always come up. You'll have some things that go exactly to the T, but most things might not. Most things might be slightly different from when you set out.
Yeah. And honestly, it's I mean, I don't know. I've worked in both environments. I definitely prefer the agile approach. It's a lot more fun, a lot more engaging as you go. It's so it's worked well for us and for our clients, I think.
And it supports better the people aspect of businesses that we're talking about here, and that again is often ignored. Is it's set up, Agile is set up to handle when your stakeholder comes in after a vacation, after talking to some guy at a conference, and wants to pivot away from everything you were doing before and instead do some new cutting edge feature instead. Agile is set up to support that. Waterflow is not. It just handles the pivots. I mean, we see so many organizations who will decide on requirements on 1 week. Once they get to the testing period, they say, "Oh, that is what we asked for, but actually, let's do it this way instead." And we're here to however we can.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot of ground about these relationships. Are we missing anything that you wanted to mention in particular about the agency and client relationship? How to get the most out of your e-commerce agency?
Oh, I mean, we could talk for days about it. We covered the high level points. The single kind of final note that I would add is just as an organization, at a minimum, make sure once a quarter, all of the stakeholders are meeting internally and also meeting with your agency and talking about the development that you've done and the relationship as a whole. It's a healthy thing. And, I can't throw out specific numbers, but it can be a make or break thing. It can be the difference between thousands and thousands of dollars, the personnel that you have working on the site and their level of comprehension.
Yeah. Yeah. And generally, I think this is my final thought is don't bottle things up. Like if you have a concern, if you have a question, don't be afraid to approach your agency with that concern. And I'll give you one example. as I said earlier, we work primarily on Adobe Commerce and Magento websites. And if for whatever reason a client says, you know what, I'm thinking of moving to Shopify, like that's not something we want to hear 2 weeks before they flip the switch. Like we want to hear that early on for several reasons. One, yeah, we'd love to keep you, but like, is that really the best platform for you? And your agency is really well situated to help talk you through that and maybe identify some issues that maybe you weren't aware of. Not again to necessarily keep you in their realm, but at least like they're an asset of information that you can really tap into when you're making a move like that, because making the wrong move on an e-commerce platform is a really big problem further down the road. Any major relationship issues, don't bottle those up. Like the sooner you get them out in front of your agency and you can have those open conversations, the sooner you can have resolution and solutions. So that's kind of another thought that I've got on that. So with that, I think we're going to wrap up this first episode. We've got conversations that we're going to have with a few other people from a couple of other agencies, and hopefully from some clients as well, to again kind of ask questions about the agency client relationship in e-commerce development and how we can really get the most out of it. So Jared, I thank you again for spending your time today, and it's not billable as far as I understand, so I appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Yep. Thank you, Tim.
All right, thank you.
For more insights on how to improve your e-commerce website and for a free consultation, visit IronPlane.com. Follow us on social media and like and subscribe below.